Alexandre Vasconcelos, 48, was the kind of man who carried the world in his gaze and control in his hands. Owner of a five-star hotel chain spread across Brazil, Mexico, and the Caribbean, he had earned awards, wealth, and, above all, power. His name was synonymous with luxury tourism excellence. His face had graced the covers of international magazines. But Alexandre was not loved. He was feared, and he liked it that way. He didn't care for deep connections. His motto was simple: affection weakens, results protect. This philosophy kept him on top for decades, until the day the sky, quite literally, turned against him. On a sunny Monday morning in Puerto Vallarta, on Mexico's western coast, Alexandre boarded his private helicopter to personally inspect a new property under construction atop a cliff. It was a bold project with a panoramic view of the Pacific, where he planned to build the most exclusive hotel on the continent. The seasoned pilot noticed unusual winds as they approached, but Alexandre insisted, "Land. I want to see it with my own eyes." No one could have predicted that a common lateral gust along those cliffs would be enough to change the course of an entire empire, and the life of a man who thought he was untouchable. If you love intense stories, filled with twists and raw emotion until the very end, subscribe now and turn on the notification bell, because this story is just getting started, and I promise it will surprise you. The helicopter lost stability and struck a rocky formation before crashing partially into a clearing. The pilot died instantly. Alexandre survived, but his body did not. The cervical spine fracture was devastating, complete quadriplegia, with minimal facial and eye movement. He was pulled from the wreckage by air rescue, taken to an elite hospital in Mexico City, and after 3 weeks without signs of improvement, transferred to a rehabilitation center in the United States. During the first few days, there were messages, flowers, sympathy. Within 3 weeks, silence, friends, none. Business partners, left everything to the lawyers. Even his fiancée Bianca walked away. Alexandre was no longer the same man, neither physically nor emotionally. His family, with whom he had already kept a distant relationship, decided to place him in his own mansion in a luxury neighborhood of Puerto Vallarta. They set up a private hospital room, motorized bed, imported equipment, private medical staff, but none of those resources brought life back to that body. Once called the corporate lion, Alexandre was now known among the house staff as the shadow of what once was. Silence became his language, solitude his only visitor. As months passed, the routine became torturous for everyone. Hired professionals rarely lasted more than a few days. "It's like caring for a body without a soul," they'd say. He didn't respond, didn't blink on command, didn't speak, didn't eat on his own, didn't show pain. Doctors said he was lucid, but emotionally disconnected from life. One caregiver once said, "He looks at me like he's already dead inside." Another described being with Alexandre as attending an endless funeral. Some lasted hours, others just a few days. In 2 years, 14 caregivers came and went. None stayed, none connected. The family, who managed the assets and feigned public concern, had begun to consider transferring him to an international clinic, but that would harm the Vasconcelos brand. The media had started asking, where is Alexandre, the king of resorts? Internally, he was seen as a silent, costly burden. The cruel truth. No one wanted Alexandre anymore, not alive, not dead, but no one had the courage to say it out loud. It was easier to keep him locked away in room 201 of the mansion, a living statue of decay. And yet, something kept him from completely giving up. Every day when the window was opened in the morning, his eyes would lock onto the fog-covered mountains in the distance. Strangely, around that same time, the household made one more attempt. They opened a new position for a caregiver, but this time they applied a strict filter. They wanted someone without emotional bonds, no history of attachment to patients, someone practical, cold, if possible. What they didn't know was that something was about to happen in that mansion, something that would change everything. Do you think Alexandre deserved to be abandoned by everyone? Type yes. Or do you believe no one deserves to be alone? Far from all the luxury, the wide windows overlooking the Pacific, and the polished marble floors of the Vasconcelos mansion in Puerto Vallarta, there was an entirely different world, and in that world lived Laura Martins, 32, a woman of few words, many traumas, and a heart that, though wounded, still beat with a quiet dignity. She lived in a humble community on the outskirts of Guadalajara, in a cramped single-room home. The roof leaked when it rained, the gas ran out before the month ended, and the bills piled up in the corner of the fridge, held by a cracked magnet that read, "Better days will come." But that phrase had long lost its meaning. Laura was a trained nurse, and an excellent one. She had been a top student, dedicated, skilled, meticulous. But her honesty had nearly cost her everything. After reporting harassment by the hospital director, she was dismissed under the pretext of inappropriate conduct. Everyone knew the truth, but silence was more convenient. For over a year, Laura survived on odd jobs, caring for the elderly at low daily rates, cleaning houses where she was treated as invisible, and when she had the energy, helping at the local pharmacy. What she earned barely covered the basics. 3 months of overdue rent loomed like a reminder that the ground beneath her could vanish at any moment, and it was about to. One ordinary night, after another exhausting shift cleaning a makeshift clinic, Laura returned home, drained. She took off her shoes, served herself cold rice from the day before, and opened the old laptop she had received from her former hospital. It was her only window to a different world. With no real hope, she visited a job site, more out of habit than expectation. That's when a listing, buried among the usual ones, caught her eye. Looking for private caregiver. Above average salary, housing included, discretion essential. The text was short, almost cold, but the salary, bolded, made Laura blink. It was 5 times what she earned doing all her side jobs combined. A nearly surreal number for someone unsure if she'd even have a roof over her head the following week. Impulse, that was the word. She clicked, filled in the form. There weren't many requirements, just experience and immediate availability. It didn't mention who the employer was or who needed care, not even the exact location. But full housing was all the convincing she needed. The next day, an eviction notice would arrive. Laura had no time left to wait for miracles. Maybe this was her last chance before collapse. And even without knowing where she was going or who she'd meet, she decided to go. For the first time in months, she felt she might be doing something that could, just maybe, change her fate. 2 days later, the email arrived. Interview confirmed, address attached. Time 3:00 p.m. When she stepped off the bus, Laura was greeted by a scene that looked like it belonged in a movie. The mansion was set in an isolated area, surrounded by tall walls, with wrought iron gates and an entrance that looked more like a botanical garden than a front yard. As she walked in, watched by cameras and silent staff, she felt out of place, almost like a trespasser. She wore her best dress, already faded, and tied her hair back to appear more professional, but her eyes gave away what she couldn't hide: exhaustion, fear, and a flicker of faith. She was led to a cold room with classical furniture and minimalist decor. While she waited, the door opened and a silver-haired woman entered with firm steps, her posture commanding, gaze trained. This was Donna Mercedes, the Vasconcelos mansion's housekeeper for nearly 20 years. She knew everything about the house, about Alexandra, and about the loneliness that haunted every corner. But she wasn't warm. She didn't smile. She spoke with perfect punctuation, and Laura quickly understood. This was no ordinary interview. "You were chosen because no one else wants this job," Mercedes said without preamble. "The patient is lucid but does not speak, does not react. He may seem dead, but he's not, and you must treat him as if he were alive. It's a full-time position. You'll live here. You cannot leave without permission. The salary is high because the demand is extreme. Can you handle that?" Laura swallowed hard. She wanted to ask more, but knew that any hesitation might cost her the opportunity. She simply replied, "Yes, I accept." Mercedes looked at her a little longer, as if trying to predict the ending before the story began, then added, "Mr. Vasconcelos doesn't tolerate noise, or perfume, or questions." Those words echoed inside Laura like both a warning and a challenge. She felt a chill run down her spine, but she didn't waver. "Would you be brave enough to accept a job without knowing who the patient is?" Type, "Stay strong, Laura. You start tomorrow," said the housekeeper, without kindness, without even looking up from the papers. Laura nodded silently, hiding the lump forming in her throat. She was grateful, but she was also afraid. The harshness of that woman, combined with the mansion's eerie atmosphere, was already a clear sign. Here, you're just another cog in the machine, replaceable, disposable. Still, she clung to hope. After all, what more did she have to lose? The next morning at exactly 6:30 a.m., Laura stepped off the bus with the same torn suitcase, now dust-stained from the road. She was exhausted, hadn't slept well, and her feet still ached from the previous day's walk. But something in her eyes, even tired, revealed an invisible strength, a quiet defiance, the kind of courage only deeply wounded people possess. And it's that kind of person who, without realizing it, changes someone else's destiny. As she passed through the mansion's tall gates, she was greeted by one of the maids, who led her through the back of the estate to a more discreet and distant wing. The path was lined with neatly trimmed hedges, but the air was heavy, too silent. The windows were always closed. Even the breeze seemed to avoid them. As if even the wind refused to enter that house, it only intensified the chill running down her spine. Her room was simple, functional, but clean. It had a narrow bed, an old dresser, and a single window facing a tall wall. On the bed, folded with precision, was a white coat with a subtle embroidered label, Private Assistance VSC. Beside it, an ID badge without a photo. Only the name, Laura Martins. The maid who had guided her said nothing, simply pointed to the uniform and left. Laura dressed in silence, and when she looked at herself in the mirror, she barely recognized the reflection. Inside, she was still the same woman from the neighborhood, but on the outside, she now wore the mask of a professional ready to face the unthinkable. Minutes later, there was a knock at her door. It was the day nurse. Dark-skinned, deep-set eyes, tired expression. His name was Dr. Elias, and he got straight to the point. He's been in the same condition for 2 years and 8 months. Doesn't speak, doesn't react, doesn't show pain, he said in a low but firm voice. If you have any hope, let it go now. He won't get better. Just do the basics and follow instructions. She simply nodded, but inside, a spark was lit. Because, unlike many, Laura believed the most dangerous pain was the one no one could see. At the door of the room, a chill ran down her spine. The air there felt heavier, stiller, the kind of place where time doesn't pass. It decays. The doorknob was cold and metallic. When she turned it, the sound of the lock echoed like thunder through the mansion's silence. She took a deep breath and stepped in. The room was large, with heavy curtains blocking out the light. An old stereo played a looping Chopin. Instrumental, an unexpected detail that immediately filled the space with melancholy. The hospital bed stood in the center, surrounded by silent monitors and a nearby armchair draped with a blanket. But none of that prepared her for what she saw lying there. Alexandre Vasconcelos lay motionless, pale, with an unkempt beard that hinted at months of emotional abandonment. His eyes were open, fixed on a point on the ceiling. But what struck Laura most was the contrast. He wasn't the frail old man she had expected. He wasn't elderly or ravaged by disease. He was clearly a man who had once been incredibly strong. A sharp jawline, defined features, a slightly furrowed brow. His hands, now resting on the sheets, were large, veined. Hands that had worked, commanded, conquered, and even paralyzed. There was something powerful and heartbreakingly sad about that face. She stood there for a few seconds, unsure of what to do. Her stomach tightened, because behind that lifeless appearance was someone who not long ago had the world at his feet. Now he was trapped inside himself, a prison with no bars, but a life sentence all the same. She slowly approached, put on gloves and gently began cleaning his hands. And even though it wasn't required, she spoke. "Good morning, Mr. Vasconcelos. My name is Laura. I'll be taking care of you." Nothing. No movement. Not even a blink. Only the sound of the IV dripping steadily. But she continued, never imagining that this would be the beginning of something that would completely change her life. If you believe even the hardest hearts can be touched by empathy and humanity, leave a like. There are many here rooting for this story, and your support shows you're one of them. The days in the mansion passed in routine silence. The sun always rose behind the mountains, spreading golden light through windows that were never opened. Meals were served on time. Footsteps echoed with rehearsed discipline. Staff spoke quietly, obeyed quickly, and avoided crossing the housekeeper at all costs. But something was beginning to disrupt the invisible pattern. Laura Martins was no longer just another silent shadow in the mansion. Without raising her voice, without defying rules or seeking attention, Laura was drawing eyes. Not for her looks or charm, but for the way she cared for Alexandra. It was different. While others had acted mechanically, she seemed to carry a soul in her hands. No movement was rushed, no gesture. Indifferent. She brushed his teeth as if tending to a fragile child, She applied cream to his hands while softly narrating stories. Even the way she covered him at night, it was done like one might cover an old memory, with reverence. The mansion staff began to notice. The cook, Donna Inez, was the first to comment. "She talks to him like he's responding." "And isn't he?" the gardener replied, half joking, half genuinely curious. And slowly, their gazes changed. Laura, once merely tolerated, began to inspire something rare in that house. Admiration. But where admiration is born, discomfort sometimes follows. Donna Mercedes, the housekeeper, noticed quickly. The subtle respect Laura was beginning to earn from others felt like a threat. For years, she had been the mansion's central authority, enforcing silence, order, and obedience. Laura's arrival, with her gentle ways and eyes that seemed to see beyond appearances, was unsettling her grip, and she wouldn't allow it. So, cold and calculated, she began planting small doubts. Never directly, just whispers. Did you know she was fired from a hospital for suspicious behavior? Ever notice how she avoids talking about her past? Be careful. People who smile too much are often hiding something. The words floated like sweet poison, and even those who liked Laura began to wonder, who was she really? Where did she come from? Why does she seem so invested? But Laura, as always, remained silent, not out of weakness, but choice. She knew defending herself would only give more power to the rumors, so she shielded herself with work. And the more they talked, the more she poured herself into care, because something inside her had shifted. Despite the back pain, the sleepless nights, the relentless routine, Laura felt alive. Not because of the mansion, the salary, or stability, but because of him. There was something about Alexandre Vasconcelos that made her stay, even mute, even motionless, even unresponsive. He stirred in her a compassion that made no logical sense. So she kept talking to him, every day. She spoke about her childhood, about mornings selling cake with her mother at the market, about dreams she gave up. She read book passages aloud, sang quiet songs from her grandmother's church, and sometimes she just sat there, silent, but present. Because to her, being present was the greatest act of love one could offer someone the world had forgotten. But Laura carried her own pain too. Wham! The end of each day she would lock her small room and cry, not out of weakness, but relief. Finally, she had somewhere to place all that had never fit inside her chest. She cried for what she'd lost, for the injustice, for everything she'd kept silent. And mostly she cried for the man with sad eyes who, even in silence, seemed to hear her every word. Until, on an ordinary day, something extraordinary happened. Laura was preparing soup to feed Alexandra. She was more tired than usual, her head heavy, her hands trembling. When she entered the room, she tripped on the rug and the bowl slipped crashing to the floor. The noise was sharp. Shards flew. Hot soup splattered the white walls. She fell to her knees, frustrated, ashamed. Tears escaped right there. "I'm sorry, I just wanted to get it right. I just wanted to..." Her voice broke. And then it happened. Alexandra blinked, once, twice. Then, with visible effort, moved his jaw. Laura froze. Every hair on her body stood. For a moment, she thought it was her imagination, but it wasn't. She approached slowly, kneeling beside the bed. "You heard me? Is that it? Did you respond?" His eyes, though still cloudy, focused on hers. There was no smile, no sound. But in that gaze, she saw something she'd never seen before. Presence. As if from deep within, Alexandra was screaming for help. "Are you hoping Alexandra recovers? Comment with a little heart emoji so I know you're here." After that miraculous moment, the blink, the slight jaw movement, something inside Laura awakened. It was as if a long-sealed door had creaked open just enough to let in a single beam of light. A tiny gesture, almost invisible, but for someone who loves in silence, it was everything. And for her, it was enough. In the following days, Laura doubled down on his care. She extended his massage sessions, began using verbal prompts, encouraged movement with visual and audio cues. She even changed the music, opting for lighter, happier tunes in hopes of sparking emotional responses. But to her surprise, Alexandra withdrew again, locked in, frozen, eyes empty. That tiny spark she had seen, gone, and with it came a cold sadness, as if she had failed by believing too much. Still, she didn't give up. Every night after caring for him, Laura locked herself in her room and dove into research. She read scientific papers, caregiver forums, medical interviews, watched countless videos about alternative therapies. One phrase stuck with her. Emotional memory is the last to die. She repeated it like a mantra. He needs to feel again, to feel something. On a bright Wednesday morning, as sunlight filtered through the curtains, Laura had an idea. Simple, but bold. Maybe if Alexandra could feel the sunlight on his skin, hear the birds, breathe the garden air, maybe it would reconnect him to something, a forgotten memory, a trace of freedom. The plan was simple, 30 minutes in the garden. But when she proposed it to Donna Mercedes, the response was swift, cold, final. Absurd, out of the question. Laura explained the benefits, cited research, favorable weather, help from the nurse, but the housekeeper simply folded her arms and replied, "This man hasn't left this house since the accident, and he will continue not to." And then, with a voice low yet filled with venom, "You're here to care, not to question orders." Laura felt a lump in her throat. For a moment it felt like they didn't want Alexandra to get better, as if his prison served someone's interest. But she said nothing, swallowed her pride, lowered her eyes, and walked away. Frustration followed her the rest of the day like a silent shadow, but she didn't let it affect her work. On the contrary, with every bandage change, every new bath, she added more tenderness, and every day she continued her one-sided conversations. "The dollar went up today, Alexandra. Your board held a meeting, but without you, of course. Did you know one of your hotels in Cancun won an award for Best Resort in Mexico?" She spoke as if he could answer, and maybe, somehow, he did. Over time, his prolonged gazes became more frequent. Sometimes his eyes seemed to lock onto hers with more intention, as if he didn't know what to say, but didn't want to stay silent anymore. Then, the improbable happened. On Friday morning, Mercedes announced she'd be taking 2 days off, a rare event. The housekeeper rarely left the mansion, especially for leisure. She said she was visiting her sister in San Miguel de Allende and would return Sunday night. Upon hearing the news, Laura said nothing. But inside, a plan was already forming. She knew this might be her only chance. Saturday morning, she woke up earlier than usual, prepared everything in advance, adjusted Alexandra's motorized chair, tested the equipment, checked the outside temperature. She asked for help from Carlos, the young nurse on duty, someone she had a respectful rapport with. He hesitated, but when he looked into her eyes, he saw something that convinced him. It was more than determination. It was faith. "If anything goes wrong, I don't know you," he joked nervously. Laura smiled. "I'll take full responsibility." Very carefully, they took Alexandra out to the garden, a wide space with old trees, colorful flowers, and a wooden bench that looked forgotten by time. It was the first time the businessman had been outside his room in nearly 3 years. When the breeze touched his face, Laura thought he inhaled more deeply. His eyes moved slowly. A small bird landed nearby, singing. The leaves danced with the wind, and the sun seemed to caress his skin with longing. She knelt beside the chair, held his hand, and whispered, "Do you remember this, Alexandra? This is life." For a few minutes they stayed there in silence. A beautiful silence, full, alive. But Laura had no idea that this decision would come with a price too high. Would you risk your job for someone who can't even thank you? Yes, I would have done the same as Laura. No, I would have followed the rules. Type in the comments. Are you on the side of reason or compassion? In the quiet hallways of the Vasconcelos mansion, more and more eyes turned toward Laura's quiet figure. There was something about her that stirred discomfort, but also, secretly, admiration. The maids whispered, though without malice at first. It was more a mix of curiosity and disbelief. Why does she care so much? For who? For what? Marina, one of the longest-serving staff members, couldn't help but mutter softly, "That girl's going to get hurt. That man is never coming back. He's paying the price for everything he did." Those who had known Alexandra before the accident remembered a cold, imposing man, the kind of boss who never said good morning, who never smiled, who treated people like chess pieces. To many, the accident was just karma. But Laura didn't know that past, and even if she did, maybe it wouldn't have mattered. That day in the garden, with the breeze rustling the trees and the sunlight warming Alexandra's skin, Laura felt she had done the right thing. For 2 hours, she stayed by his side, talking about everything, as if they were just two old friends catching up. She spoke about her childhood, her nephews, a bread recipe her grandmother had taught her, all with calm, never expecting a reply, but certain that something in him was listening. At 4 p.m. she realized it was time for his medication. She kissed his hand and whispered, "Our walk ends for today, okay? But tomorrow, maybe." Alexandra didn't react. His face remained expressionless. His eyes, though open, showed no emotion, but Laura felt something different, as if deep down he was fighting with everything he had not to disappear again. That feeling kept her going. Back in the room, Laura adjusted his sheets, fluffed his pillows, and continued her routine gently. As she softly rubbed lotion into his skin, she teased playfully, "Did you enjoy our little outing, Mr. Alexandra? We could do it more often. As long as Donna Mercedes isn't around, of course." She smiled, but he didn't. No blink, no signal, just the rhythm of his breath and the beeping monitor. The silence returned, but now it felt like it was waiting for something. 2 days later, peace in the mansion was broken by Mercedes's return, punctual, stern as ever. She walked through the front door dragging a small leather suitcase. Her eyes scanned the entrance hall, searching for anything out of place. "Everything in order?" she asked curtly. "Yes, ma'am," came the chorus reply, but not everything was in order. Marina, craving gossip, waited for her moment. When she saw the housekeeper alone in the kitchen, she approached quickly, looked around, and dropped the bomb like a precious secret. "You won't believe what that nurse did." What followed was a storm. Mercedes, strict and meticulous, did not tolerate disobedience, especially from a newcomer, and upon hearing that Laura had taken Alexandra to the garden without permission, her expression shifted from usual disdain to controlled rage. Her hands gripped her necklace, her eyes narrowed, and in her chest, a deep, old anger, perhaps not just from this event, but from feeling like she was losing control of the house she ruled for decades. At that moment, Laura was in Alexandra's room, gently massaging his arms while Ludovico Einaudi played softly. The sun cast warm reflections on the walls. It was a calm afternoon, until the door burst open. "Who do you think you are, girl?" Mercedes yelled, barging in. Laura jumped, pausing her movements and trying to stay calm. "Please, Donna Mercedes, Mr. Alexandra is here. He might get startled." "Don't you dare tell me to be quiet," she barked, her face flushed with rage. "Do you have any idea what you did? You took him outside like he was your toy, like you know better than the doctors, better than me, better than everyone here." Laura tried to explain, said it was done carefully, with no risk, just an attempt to stimulate his senses. But Mercedes wasn't listening. Her wounded ego spoke louder. "You are nothing here, an amateur," she screamed. "Alexandra needs professionalism, not your cheap sentimentality. He will stay in that bed until he dies. Got it? You won't save him with flowers and lullabies." Laura, eyes brimming, pleaded, "Please, he's going to respond. Let me keep trying just a little longer. I feel he's coming back." But Mercedes was merciless. "Pack your things. You're fired. You are no longer welcome in this house." Silence fell across the room. Laura lowered her head. Each word from the housekeeper pierced her like a knife. She didn't cry out of pride, but because it hurt. How can someone be so cruel, she thought. How can they not see that behind that frozen body is a man trying to return? But before she could say anything else, and something happened. A sound echoed in the room. Weak, ragged, but real. A voice. "Laura, stay!" And if that gave you chills, just imagine what's coming next. So hurry, subscribe to the channel now and turn on the notification bell, because the next scenes will move your heart. The voice was hoarse, shaky, but clear. So clear that both women froze. Time stood still. Laura's eyes widened. She covered her mouth in shock. Mercedes stepped back, as if she'd seen a ghost. The sound came from the bed, from him. Alexandra had spoken, for the first time in nearly 3 years. What will happen next? Comment below for the next chapter, and stay tuned so you don't miss a thing.